Jerusalem, Israel. Time 01:45 a.m. local time, April 14, 2024. The sky over the old city is a deep, ink-black velvet, the ancient limestone walls, usually bathed in soft amber light, are dark, a citywide blackout. The only sound for miles is the wind. Then the silence breaks. Not with a bang, but with a hum, a deep, droning vibration that seems to come from everywhere. And nowhere at once. It is the sound of a shod, the moped of the skies flying low and slow, but tonight it is not alone. The horizon to the east begins to glow, not with the sunrise, but with the exhaust plumes of dozens, then hundreds, of cruise missiles. On the rooftops, families huddle in stairwells, children clutch dolls, elderly men, veterans of wars. Past listen to the hum and know, this is different. This is not a rocket from Gaza. This is the sound of a nation-state opening its armories. Inside the Nevatim airbase in the Negev desert, the ground trembles. F-35I Adyrs, the pride of the Israeli Air Force, are scrambled into the night, their afterburners cutting through the darkness. But the threat is not just in front of them. Above them, ballistic missiles, launched from deep inside Iran, are arcing up through the exosphere. They are not buzzing like drones, they are falling like meteors. In a bunker in Tel Aviv, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu watches a screen filled with red dots. His military secretary whispers updates. The world watches. For the first time in history, the Islamic Republic of Iran has launched a direct, conventional military attack on the state of Israel. The decades-long shadow war is over. The firestorm has begun. This was the night the Middle East held its breath, but to understand why the drones were humming over Jerusalem, we must first look at a consulate in Damascus, 12 days earlier. Location, Meze District, Damascus, Syria. Time 17:00 hours, local time, April 1, 2024. The five-story building attached to the Iranian embassy is unremarkable. It houses the consulate. Diplomatic annex protected by international law. Inside, men in civilian clothes review documents. They are not diplomats, not in the traditional sense. They are commanders of the Quds Force, the extraterritorial arm of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. At the top of the chain in that building sits Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi. At 63, he is a veteran of the Iran-Iraq War, a man who spent nearly 2 decades commanding the Quds Force, Lebanon and Syria. He is the architect of Iran's military influence in the Levant. His deputy general, Mohammad Hadi Haji Rahimi, is with him. They are meeting to coordinate logistics, supply lines to Hezbollah intelligence sharing with Damascus, -69. They do not hear the jets. At approximately 17:00, Israeli F-35I Adyr fighters, flying low to avoid Syrian radar, release 6 missiles. The munitions are precision-guided, designed for vertical penetration. They do not strike the main embassy building, which would constitute an act of war against the sovereign soil of Iran. They strike the consulate annex, a deliberate surgical calculation. The building folds into itself. Concrete dust mingles with smoke. When the rubble settles, 7 people are dead, among them Zahedi, Rahimi, and 5 accompanying officers. The Iran ambassador Hossein Akbari survives. He stands in front of the ruins hours later, his diplomatic composure cracking. The response, he tells reporters, will be harsh, -26. In Tel Aviv, the Israeli military offers no comment. Their standard phrase, "We do not comment on," reports in the foreign media, but the message is understood. Israel has assassinated a senior Iranian commander, something it has done before, in parking lots, on motorcycles, through remote explosives, but never inside a diplomatic facility. The distinction matters. Under the Vienna Conventions, diplomatic premises are inviolable. To strike them is to strike sovereign territory. Iran's foreign minister, Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, calls his Syrian counterpart. He labels the attack a breach of all international conventions. He demands a response from the international community. That response does not come. The United States, through State Department spokesman Matthew Miller, says it is concerned about anything that would be escalatory. Russia condemns the attack as unacceptable, but no one moves troops. No one activates defense pacts. The world watches, waits, and assumes this is another chapter in the long, quiet war between Jerusalem and Tehran, -29. They are wrong. Inside the IRGC command structure, the calculation is different. Zahedi was not just another officer. He was the man who built Hezbollah's precision-guided missile program. He was the link between Tehran and its most valuable proxy. His death inside a consulate creates a constitutional crisis within the Islamic Republic. To not respond is to admit that Iranian soil can be violated with impunity. To respond too weakly is to lose face before Hezbollah, before Hamas, before the axis of resistance. The debate in Tehran lasts 12 days. The moderate faction, led by President Ebrahim Raisi's administration, urges restraint, a diplomatic campaign, perhaps a cyber operation, but the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, demands more. They have lost a general. They demand a general's response. 5:10. By April 9, the decision is made. It is not a decision for proxy warfare. It is not a decision for another assassination in Cyprus or a ship seizure in the Strait of Hormuz. It is a decision to launch, for the first time in history, a direct conventional military attack from the Islamic Republic of Iran against the State of Israel. -15. The shadow war, 45 years in the making, is about to end. Location: Kermanshah Province, Iran, and Tel Aviv, Israel. Time: April 10-13, 2024. In the western mountains of Iran, near the Iraqi border, the Revolutionary Guard Aerospace Force moves. Satellite imagery, later declassified by commercial firms, will show the activity. Transporters, Erector launchers or TELs, moving out of hardened tunnels. The Shad 191 and Shad 129. Drones with their distinctive inverted V-tail designs are rolled onto launch rails. The missiles Ghadar, the MAD, and the newer K-Bar Shekin are fueled in underground facilities. The Americans see it first. National Security spokesman John Kirby, in a hastily arranged briefing on April 11, confirms the obvious: the United States is fully committed to the defense of Israel. Iran has publicly threatened to launch a significant attack. The language is careful, but the subtext is terrifying. Washington knows something is coming, it just does not know when. Inside Israel, the defense establishment enters a state of high alert. The Home Front Command, the agency responsible for civilian protection, issues no public instructions, yet, but in military intelligence. Unit 8200, Israel's Signals Intelligence Agency, works around the clock. They intercept chatter. They track the movements of IRGC officers. They know the window is closing. By April 12, the picture sharpens. The attack will not be a single strike. It will be a wave, a combined arms assault from Iranian soil. Drones, launched first, will take hours to reach Israeli airspace. Cruise missiles, faster, will follow. Ballistic missiles, launched last, will arrive first. The goal is saturation, to overwhelm the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow system by forcing them to track too many targets at once. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convenes the Security Cabinet in the Kuria, Israel's Pentagon, in Tel Aviv. The discussions are tense. Some ministers advocate for a preemptive strike, hit the launch sites before they fire, but the intelligence is not precise enough, and the Americans, through defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, sent a clear message: if Israel preempts, it stands alone. If Israel waits, the coalition will help defend. Netanyahu waits. In Tehran, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei gives the final order. The language of the attack is crafted carefully. It will be large enough to restore deterrence, to avenge Zahedi, to prove that Iranian soil is red lines, but it will be telegraphed enough through Swiss diplomatic channels, through the Turks, through the Iraqis, that Israel and the United States have time to prepare. It is a paradox, a surprise attack that everyone sees coming. On April 13, the streets of Tehran remain calm. The bazaars are open, but in the war rooms, the final countdown begins. The drones are loaded. The missile guidance systems are calibrated. The operators, many of them veterans of the Yemen War, sit at their consoles. 3,000 kilometers away in Jerusalem, the sun sets on the Sabbath. Families finish their dinners. In the north, near the border with Lebanon, residents hear the usual noises of the night. They do not know that, within hours, their skies will be filled with fire. The world holds its breath. Airlines reroute flights. The White House Situation Room fills with officials. The French, the British, the Jordanians, all are notified. A defensive coalition, unprecedented in its Composition is quietly forming. But the drones are already in the air. Location: Iranian launch sites and Israeli airspace. Time: 22:00:04, 30 hours, April 13-14, 2024. The Iranian plan, codenamed Operation True Promise, is not random. It is a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction, designed by the commanders of the IRGC Aerospace Force to exploit a single weakness in modern air defense, the magazine depth -6. The first wave launches at approximately 22:00. The Shahd drones, 185 of them, lift off from launch sites in western Iran. Each is a delta-winged loitering munition, powered by a 50-horsepower piston engine that emits a distinct, low-frequency hum, the sound that will later haunt the skies. Over Jerusalem, their speed is just 185 kilometers per hour. Their journey to Israel will take more than 4 hours. They are slow, loud, and vulnerable, but they are also cheap, costing as little as $20,000. Their job is not to survive. Their job is to force the defense to expend expensive interceptors. Tools X. Behind them at 23:30, the cruise missiles launch. The Shahd 238, a jet-powered evolution of the drone, accelerates to 600 kilometers per hour. The Quds 4, with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers, flies nap of the Earth, hugging terrain to avoid radar. These missiles are smaller, faster, and harder to spot. They are designed to slip through gaps that the drones might open -267. But the real hammer falls last. At 01:00, the ballistic missiles ignite. The Gather 110, an evolution of the North Korean-designed Shahab-3, carries a 650-kilogram warhead. The Ahmad, a precision variant, steers itself during re-entry. The K-Bar-Shekin, Iran's newest solid-fuel missile, boasts accuracy measured in tens of meters. These missiles arc up through the exosphere, exiting the atmosphere entirely before plunging back toward Earth at Mach 5. They have just 7 minutes of flight time. From launch to impact, the drones buy time. The cruise missiles complicate tracking, but the ballistic missiles are designed to kill -67. In total, 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 110 ballistic missiles streak toward Israel. The IRGC believes saturation is the key. They hope that by the time the ballistic missiles descend, the Arrow and David sling batteries will be empty, their crews exhausted, their radar confused. It is a gamble, one that assumes Israel's defenses have limits -167. The human angle: shelters and skies. Location: Jerusalem and Nevatim Airbase. Time: 01:45:02, 30 hours, April 14, 2024. In a stairwell in Jerusalem's Rehavia neighborhood, a family of 5 huddles on concrete steps. The mother clutches a toddler. The father scrolls through WhatsApp, reading updates from friends. The air raid siren, a rising and falling wail, echoes off limestone walls. They have 90 seconds. The children do not cry. They have learned this ritual from previous conflicts, rockets from Gaza. Sirens in the night, but this time the mother knows something is different. The news said Iran, not Gaza. Iran is a country, not a militant group. Iran has real missiles. Above them, the sky ignites. The Iron Dome battery, positioned on a hill outside the city, detects the incoming threat, a cruise missile, low and fast. The radar calculates trajectory, predicts impact zone. The control system decides the missile is headed for a residential block. Intercept. A Tamir interceptor launches with a whoosh, its solid fuel motor burning bright orange. It climbs, turns, and meets the cruise missile. 3 kilometers from the city, the explosion is a flash, then nothing. Debris falls into empty fields. At Nevatim Airbase, the scene is different. This is a military target, the base that launched the F-35s. That struck Damascus. The Iranians know it. The ballistic missiles are aimed here, inside the base. Ground crews scramble. Pilots already in cockpits prepare to taxi, but they cannot take off while the missiles are incoming. They wait. The first ballistic missile descends. The Arrow 2 system, designed to intercept in the upper atmosphere, fires. The interceptor climbs, tracks, and detonates. The warhead is destroyed 30 kilometers high, but another follows, and another. The system is handling the load, but each intercept drains the magazine. Operators watch their screens, calculating margins. They are winning, but barely -8. A young girl in the stairwell asks her mother, Are we going to die? The mother says no, she does not know if that is true. She only knows that outside, in the darkness, pilots, radar operators, and coalition allies are fighting to make her answer honest. Location: airspace over Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Time 02:00:04:00 hours, April 14, 2024. The drones do not fly directly to Israel. They take the long way through Iraqi airspace, then south. Over Jordan, approaching from the east, it is a predictable route dictated by geography, and it is precisely that predictability that allows something unprecedented to happen. The United States Central Command, CENTCOM, has been moving assets for days. The USS Arleigh Burke, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, sits in the eastern Mediterranean. Its Aegis combat system, designed to track Soviet cruise missiles, now tracks Iranian ones. On the destroyer, sailors watch radar screens as the first wave of drones crosses into Iraqi airspace. They have launch authority. At 02:15, the first Standard Missile-3 fires from the destroyer's vertical launch system. The SM-3 is a missile designed to intercept ballistic missiles in space. Tonight, it will also hunt drones. The missile climbs, reaches the edge of the atmosphere, and descends on a Shad 136, obliterating it 50 kilometers from the Israeli coast. But the Americans are not alone. The Royal Air Force, operating out of Cyprus, scrambles Typhoon fighters. They fly low over Jordan, their radars painting a picture of the incoming swarm. Each Typhoon carries Pavoy IV precision bombs and advanced infrared sensors. They find the drones visually, dropping ordnance on targets. Their American counterparts have designated. The French Navy, with the frigate Languedoc in the Mediterranean, activates its own air defense systems. Aster missiles launch into the night, intercepting drones headed for Israeli population centers. The French Defense Ministry will later confirm the engagement, calling it a demonstration of solidarity with our Israeli partners. But the most surprising participant is Jordan. The Hashemite Kingdom, one of only 2 Arab nations with a peace treaty with Israel, faces a dilemma. The drones and missiles are crossing its airspace. If they fall on Jordanian soil, they kill Jordanians, but if they pass through unmolested, they kill Israelis. King Abdullah II in communication with Washington makes a decision. Jordanian F-16 fighters scramble from Azraq Air Base. They join the coalition. They shoot down Iranian drones over their own territory. This is the moment the Iranian plan unravels. The IRGC assumed that only Israel and the United States would fight. They did not account for Jordan. They did not account for France and Britain. They did not account for Saudi Arabia, which quietly shares radar tracking data through American channels. A defensive coalition, unimaginable just years earlier, forms in hours. By 04:00, the drones are gone, the cruise missiles are gone, only the ballistic missiles remain, and they are flying into the teeth of the Arrow system, supported by American Aegis radar. The saturation attack has failed, not because the defenses were perfect, but because the coalition was larger than Iran anticipated. The leadership angle: Biden and Netanyahu in the bunker. Location: the White House Situation Room and the Kuria, Tel Aviv. Time 03:30 hours, April 14, 2024. The screens in the Situation Room show real-time tracking data. President Joe Biden, awake since midnight, sits with his national security team. Secretary of State Antony Blinken takes calls. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin speaks directly with his Israeli counterpart, Yoav Gallant. The call comes at 03:30. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in the Kuria bunker, picks up the phone. The connection is secure, encrypted. Biden speaks first. He offers the operational update. The coalition has intercepted the vast majority of threats. Nevatim base has sustained some damage, but it is minor, no mass casualties. The defense has held. Then Biden pivots. The president's message, confirmed later by multiple U.S. officials, is direct. You gotta win. Take the win. The United States will not participate in an Israeli counterstrike against Iran. It will not support offensive operations. The defensive coalition, so effective tonight, will dissolve if Israel chooses to escalate. Netanyahu listens. His military advisors surround him. The Israeli Air Force has aircraft fueled and armed, ready to strike Iranian nuclear sites or missile launch positions. The temptation is immense. To deliver a blow that cripples Iran's program for years, but Biden's message is clear: if Israel strikes, it strikes alone. This is the paradox of victory. Israel has just survived the largest drone and missile attack in history. The coalition has performed brilliantly, but the political cost of escalation is isolation, and isolation, for a small country surrounded by enemies, is existential. Netanyahu thanks Biden. He hangs up. The room waits. The prime minister looks at the screens at the remaining red dots at the arrows showing interceptor launches. He makes his decision for now. There will be no immediate counterstrike. Israel will wait, it will watch, it will plan, but the question, unspoken in the bunker, lingers: if not now, when? And if not a military strike, what else might Iran attempt against its leaders, its generals, its prime minister? Location: Nevatim Air Base, Negev Desert, Israel. Time 02:15, 02:30 hours, April 14, 2024. The Nevatim Air Base stretches across the desert east of Beersheba. It is one of the crown jewels of the Israeli Air Force, home to the F-35I Adir squadrons, the pilots who struck Damascus 12 days earlier. The Iranians know this. The base is marked on every targeting computer in Kermanshah. At 02:15, the first wave of ballistic missiles reaches terminal phase. The Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems have been working for hours, engaging targets in the upper atmosphere, but the sheer volume, 110 ballistic missiles, creates a mathematical problem. The interceptors are limited, the radar must prioritize. Some missiles will get through. At Nevatim, the warning sirens blare. Ground crews, those who cannot take shelter, press themselves against concrete walls. They feel the vibrations before they hear the impact. 7 ballistic missiles evade the defense network. One strikes an open area near the runway. The crater is deep, throwing asphalt and desert sand. The night sky: 2 more hit storage facilities, empty by chance, the contents moved days earlier. But 4 others find harder targets. They strike maintenance hangars, they strike infrastructure. Satellite imagery released days later will show the scars: collapsed roofs, scorched earth, the skeletons of buildings that once housed the most advanced aircraft on Earth-1. The damage is real. It is not the annihilation Iran sought, but it is proof that the defenses have limits. The IRGC Aerospace Force, watching through telemetry, records the hits. In Tehran, the commanders allow themselves a moment. Their missiles have struck an Israeli airbase. It is the first time since 1991 that any nation has landed conventional munitions on Israeli military soil. But the moment is short. The Israeli Air Force, hours later, will release a single image: an F-35I taxiing on that same runway. Intact, ready to fly. The message is clear. The base was hit, but it is not crippled. The aircraft survived. The mission continues. The official numbers, when they come, are staggering. Of the 331 projectiles launched, 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, 110 ballistic missiles. Israel and its coalition partners claim a 99% interception rate -19. The drones are destroyed over Jordan and Syria. The cruise missiles fall to American, British, and French fighters. The ballistic missiles are engaged by Arrow at the edge of space. But the 99% number, repeated in headlines, obscures a deeper truth. 7 missiles hit. 7 missiles, each carrying a 650-kilogram warhead, struck Israeli territory. In a saturation attack, the defense does not need to stop everything. It needs to stop enough. It stopped enough, but the ones that got through left craters, literal and psychological -1. The IRGC commander, General Hassan Salami, speaks to state media. He calls the operation success. He claims the missiles achieved all their objectives. The targets, he says, were military. The Nevatim base, the Ramon base, the intelligence facility on Mount Hermon, all struck. The precision, he argues, is proven -1. In Israel, the military acknowledges the damage but downplays it. A young girl in the Negev is wounded by shrapnel, the only serious casualty, -27. The base is operational, the narrative holds. But the question, unspoken, hangs in the desert air. If 7 missiles can hit a defended airbase, what happens when the number is 700? What happens when the coalition is not there? The turning point: Biden's call in the red line. Location, the White House Situation Room and the Kuria, Tel Aviv. Time 03:30, 04:00 hours, April 14, 2024. The screens in the Situation Room show the last intercepts. The threat is ending, the coalition has performed beyond expectations, but the work is not over. President Joe Biden, awake for nearly 24 hours, picks up the secure line. On the other end, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu waits in the Kuria bunker, surrounded by generals and intelligence chiefs. The conversation, reconstructed later by U.S. officials, is direct. Biden offers congratulations. The defense held no mass casualties. The coalition, the United States, Britain, France, Jordan, proved its value. Then Biden pivots. You gotta win, the president says. Take the win. The meaning is unmistakable. The United States will not support an Israeli counterstrike against Iran. It will not participate in offensive operations. The defensive coalition, so effective tonight, will dissolve if Israel chooses to escalate. The message is reinforced by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, by the entire national security apparatus -2. In the Kuria, the room falls silent. The Israeli Air Force has aircraft fueled and armed, targets inside. Iran nuclear facilities, missile launch sites, IRGC headquarters are already loaded into mission. Computers, the pilots are waiting. The temptation is immense. Netanyahu's military advisors are divided. Some argue for an immediate, devastating response. Strike that cripples Iran's nuclear program for years. They invoke the precedent of Asarak, the Iraqi reactor destroyed in 1981. They argue that deterrence, once broken, must be restored with overwhelming force. Others counsel restraint. The international goodwill from the defensive victory is fragile. The coalition that defended Israel tonight includes Arab nations, Jordan, Saudi Arabia through intelligence sharing that would never support an Israeli strike on Iran. The United States has drawn a line. Crossing it means isolation. Netanyahu listens. He is a man who has built his career on security, on toughness, on defying international pressure, but he is also a man who understands the arithmetic of survival. Israel cannot fight Iran alone, not without American logistics, American intelligence, American political cover. He makes his decision. There will be no immediate counterstrike. Israel will wait, it will plan, it will respond in its own time. In its own way, but tonight the missiles stop here. The phone call ends. Biden returns to his advisors. Netanyahu looks at the screens at the last red dots fading, at the arrows showing the final intercepts. The immediate crisis is over, but the war in its new form has just begun. In Tehran, the IRGC commanders also watch. They see the damage assessments. They see the craters. At Nevatim, they see the world's reaction, the calls for restraint, the diplomatic maneuvers. They calculate their own victory. And in the shadows, they begin planning a different kind of response, one that does not rely on drones and missiles, but on agents and money and the long reach of assassination. Location: Isfahan, Iran, and war rooms across the Middle East. Time 04:00:06:00 hours, April 19, 2024. For 5 days the world waited, after the night of fire over Jerusalem, after the 331 projectiles and the 99% interception rate, after Biden's phone call and Netanyahu's silence, the region held its breath. The question was not whether Israel would respond, the question was how. In Tehran, the IRGC remained on high alert. Air defense systems were activated. Nuclear facilities, particularly at Natanz and Isfahan, were placed on maximum protection. The regime prepared for the worst, a strike on its nuclear program, on its leadership, on the symbols of the revolution -6. The response when it came was neither thunderous nor silent. It was precise and deliberately ambiguous. At approximately 04:00 on April 19, explosions echoed over Isfahan province in central Iran. The target was not a nuclear facility, not a Revolutionary Guard headquarters, not a symbol of the regime. It was an S-300 air defense system, the very system protecting the Natanz nuclear site. The munitions used were not F-35I strikes from Israeli airspace. According to reports, they were small quadcopter drones, launched not from jets but from inside Iranian territory, possibly by agents on the ground, possibly by other means. The choice was intentional. Small drones cannot travel long distances. Their use suggested that Israel, or its assets, had penetrated Iranian soil -6. The message was unmistakable. We can reach you anywhere. We can reach you from inside your own borders. Iranian state media moved quickly to downplay the attack. Brigadier General Siavash Mihandoust, the most senior military official in Isfahan, told state television that the explosions were not caused by Israeli strikes. They were, he claimed, air defense systems shooting down flying objects. Social media in Iran buzzed with mockery. One video showed a girl throwing a paper airplane at a building, comparing it to the Israeli strike. But the mockery masked a deeper truth. The S-300 was hit. The air defense network had been penetrated, and Israel, without claiming responsibility, without fanfare, without escalation, had delivered its response. In Washington, the reaction was carefully calibrated. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani told reporters that Israel had provided last-minute advance notice to the United States, but that Washington was not involved. -9. The message was clear. The Biden administration had been informed, had not objected, and was now working to ensure the cycle ended here. In Tehran, the calculation was equally careful. The attack had been limited. No nuclear sites were hit. No senior commanders were killed. The IRGC, through back channels, signaled that it had no plan to retaliate immediately. A senior Iranian official told Reuters, "We have no plan to strike back immediately." -9. The cycle, for now, was complete. The decision not to decide, inside Israel's war cabinet. Location: the Kuria, Tel Aviv. Time: April 14-19, 2024. The 5 days between Iran's attack and Israel's response were not quiet. Inside the Kuria, Israel's defense headquarters, the war cabinet met repeatedly. The debates, later revealed by Israeli media, were intense. Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, the two former generals and opposition leaders who had joined the emergency government, urged restraint. A massive strike on Iran, they argued, would shatter the international coalition that had just defended Israel. It would isolate the country. It would invite a second wave of missiles, potentially larger than the first. Prime Minister Netanyahu was torn. His political base demanded a strong response, something dramatic, something that restored deterrence, but he also understood the arithmetic. The United States had drawn a line. Crossing it meant losing the umbrella. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi were more aggressive. They wanted to hit harder, to strike Iran's nuclear program, to degrade its missile capabilities, to send a message that would be remembered for years. Mossad Director David Barnea, often the lead on Iran issues, supported a strong response, but emphasized the need for American buy-in. The compromise, when it came, was the Isfahan strike. It was enough to show capability. It was enough to restore a measure of deterrence, but it was limited enough to avoid triggering a new round of escalation. The S-300 was hit, the message was sent, and both sides, exhausted and wary, stepped back from the brink. But the deeper question, the question of Iran's nuclear program, of assassination plots, of the long war, remained unanswered, and in the shadows, other forces were already moving. Location: Tehran, Iran, and Tel Aviv, Israel. Time: April-September 2024. The missiles had stopped, the drones were gone, but the war in its oldest form continued. In the months following Operation True Promise, a different kind of offensive unfolded, one fought not in the skies but in the shadows. Iran, humiliated by the failure of its saturation attack, shifted tactics. If its missiles could not reach Netanyahu, perhaps its agents could. The first sign emerged in late April. Israeli security services, Shin Bet and Mossad, detected unusual communications between individuals inside Israel and handlers in Iran. The patterns were familiar. The same tradecraft used to recruit assets in Europe, in South America, in the Gulf. But this time the target was different. The target was the Prime Minister himself. -2. On September 18, 2024, Israeli authorities announced an arrest. The suspect, a 73-year-old Israeli businessman named Modi Mammon, had allegedly been recruited by Iranian intelligence to assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu. According to investigators, Mammon had traveled to Turkey twice in April and May, where he met with an Iranian businessman identified only as Eddie. During these meetings, he was smuggled across the border into Iran, hidden in the cab of a truck -26. Inside Iran, Mammon allegedly met with intelligence operatives. They discussed logistics, payment, and targets. The list included not only Netanyahu, but also Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and Shin Bet Chief Ronan Bar -6. The Iranians, according to the indictment, asked Mammon to carry out various security missions, transferring money, photographing crowded places, threatening other Israeli citizens who had been recruited but failed to comply -2. Mammon demanded an advance payment of $1 million. The Iranians refused but paid him €5,000 for his meetings and travel expenses -10. The plot, like the missile attack before it, was uncovered before it could succeed. But the message was clear. Iran had not abandoned its goal of eliminating Israeli leadership. It had simply changed methods. The limits of the shadow war. The assassination plot against Netanyahu was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader campaign, one that accelerated after the April strikes. In the months that followed, Israeli security forces uncovered multiple Iranian efforts to recruit citizens, some with criminal backgrounds, others with access to sensitive locations, to carry out attacks on Israeli soil -2. A senior Shin Bet official described the campaign. This case exemplifies the enormous efforts of Iranian intelligence agents to recruit Israeli citizens to promote terrorist activities in Israel -2. The tactics were varied. Some recruits were asked to gather intelligence on military bases. Others were tasked with identifying potential targets for future strikes. A few, like Mammon, were asked to consider assassination. The Iranians also sought to recruit Russians and Americans capable of killing Iranian dissidents in Europe and the United States -10. But the plot against Netanyahu carried particular significance. It was revenge, not only for the Damascus strike that killed Zahedi, but for the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh. In Tehran on July 31, 2024-7, Haniyeh, killed by an apparent Israeli operation in the heart of the Iranian capital, had deepened the regime's humiliation. The IRGC, already stung by the failure of its missile attack, needed to respond. Assassination offered a path, deniable, targeted, and deeply symbolic. The plot's discovery, announced publicly in September, served multiple purposes. It demonstrated Israeli intelligence penetration of Iranian operations. It warned other potential recruits, and it reminded the world that the conflict between Jerusalem and Tehran had not de-escalated. It had merely shifted form -6. In Tehran, the IRGC offered no comment. Official media downplayed the plot, dismissing it as Israeli propaganda, but the message was received in Washington, in London, in the Gulf capitals that had quietly supported Israel's defense in April. The shadow war was not over. It had simply moved indoors. Location: Tel Aviv, Tehran, Washington, and the Gulf. Time: April-October 2024. The numbers, when finally tallied, told a story that depended entirely on who was reading them. For Israel and its coalition partners, the statistics were a triumph. Of the approximately 330 projectiles launched, 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 120 to 130 ballistic missiles, 99%, were intercepted before reaching their targets -1. The drones, slow and loud, were picked off by fighter jets over Jordan and Syria. The cruise missiles fell to American, British, and French naval interceptors. The ballistic missiles, the most dangerous, were engaged by the aerosystem at the edge of space -1. A 7-year-old Bedouin girl in the Negev was seriously wounded by shrapnel, the only serious casualty -1. 31 others suffered minor injuries or anxiety while rushing to shelters -2. The Nevatim airbase, struck by several missiles, remained operational. The F-35I Adirs that had launched the Damascus strike taxied on the same runway hours later -1. For Iran, the numbers were framed differently. The IRGC Aerospace Force claimed that 50% of the ballistic missiles had reached their targets -2. They pointed to satellite imagery showing craters at Nevatim at Ramon Air Base, at an intelligence facility on Mount Hermon. The damage, they argued, proved that Israeli defenses could be penetrated. The operation, they insisted, was a success -2. The truth lay somewhere in between. 7 missiles had hit Israeli territory, 7 warheads each, carrying 500 to 650 kilograms of explosives, had struck military infrastructure -1. The damage was minor by design perhaps or by luck, but it was real. The IRGC had demonstrated that its missiles could reach Israel, could evade the layers of defense, could land on target. The question was whether that demonstration was worth the cost. The strategic reckoning. For Israel, the night of April 13-14 produced a paradox. The defense had been brilliant. The coalition, the United States, Britain, France, Jordan, and reportedly Saudi Arabia in intelligence sharing had performed beyond expectations -19, but the victory revealed a dependency. Israel could not defend itself alone against a saturation attack. It needed American ships, British jets, Jordanian airspace. It needed the coalition -9. For Iran, the calculation was equally complex. The attack had cost approximately 1/10 of what it cost Israel and its partners to defend against it -9. In a war of attrition, that math matters. Iran had shown its hand, tested Israeli defenses, and gathered intelligence that would inform future operations, but it had also ended its long-standing strategy of plausible deniability. The shadow war was over. Iran had attacked Israel directly from its own soil and invited a response -47. The response, when it came on April 19, was calibrated to send a message without triggering escalation. The strike on the S-300 radar near Isfahan, protecting the Natanz nuclear facility, demonstrated Israeli precision and reach. Satellite imagery later confirmed that the radar had been destroyed. The message was unmistakable. Israel could penetrate Iranian air defenses and strike near nuclear sites without triggering a wider war. But the deeper lesson for both sides was the fragility of the new rules. The April exchange had established a template: direct attack, limited response, de-escalation through back channels. But that template depended on restraint, on communication, on the willingness of both sides to step back from the brink, and restraint in the Middle East is never guaranteed. The October sequel. By October 2024, the template had broken. On October 1, Iran launched its second direct attack on Israel, this time with approximately 200 ballistic missiles fired in a single salvo designed to overwhelm defenses -38. The trigger was different: the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31, and the killing of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut in late September -78. Israel's campaign against the axis of resistance had reached into the heart of Tehran, into the bunkers of Beirut. Iran, humiliated and exposed, responded. This time the attack was different. No slow-moving drones telegraphed the launch, no cruise missiles gave hours of warning. Ballistic missiles, fired in rapid succession, reached Israeli airspace in 12 minutes -8. They targeted military installations, Nevatim again, Hatzerim, Tel Naf, and the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv -8. The damage was more significant. A Palestinian laborer near Jericho was killed by falling shrapnel -8. Israel's response on October 26 was also different. This time, the targets were not a single radar site. Israeli aircraft struck 4 S-300 air defense systems protecting Tehran, along with more than a dozen other air defense and ballistic missile production facilities, and a nuclear-related target at Parchin. The impact was dramatic. Iran's ballistic missile production capacity dropped from 14 new missiles per week to 1, with a recovery time of 1 to 2 years. The escalation had begun. Location: the Middle East. Time: the present. The night of April 13, 2024, was not the beginning of the war between Iran and Israel. That war began in 1979, with the fall of the Shah and the rise of the Islamic Republic. It was fought in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in the laboratories where centrifuges spun and the workshops where rockets were built. It was a war of proxies, of shadows, of deniable strikes and quiet assassinations. But that night was the end of the shadow war. When the first Shah drone crossed into Israeli airspace, it carried with it 45 years of accumulated tension. The rules, unwritten but understood, were broken. Direct attack replaced proxy warfare, national militaries replaced militant groups. The conflict, once hidden, was now visible to the world. And yet, for all the fire in the sky, the night revealed something unexpected: the limits of force. Iran's missiles, however numerous, could not destroy Israel's defenses. Israel's precision, however deadly, could not eliminate Iran's nuclear program. The coalition that formed in the darkness, Americans, Britons, French, Jordanians, Saudis, proved that the old alliances still held, that the old enmities could be set aside when the threat was shared. The assassination plots that followed, the whispers of killing Netanyahu, the arrests in Tel Aviv and Tehran, these were the aftershocks of an earthquake that had not quite arrived. They were reminders that war in the Middle East is never truly over. It merely changes form. What remains after the missiles and the counterstrikes, after the plots and the arrests, is a region transformed. The direct attack has become normal. The red line has been crossed and crossed again. The question now is not whether Iran and Israel will fight, but how and when and with what weapons and with what allies. In the stairwells of Jerusalem, families still listen for sirens. In the bunkers of Tehran, commanders still watch for blips on radar. The drones are never far. The missiles are always fueled. The war in its new form continues. But for one night in April, the world held its breath, and when it exhaled, the Middle East was different. The shadow war was dead. The fire war had begun, and the only certainty in a region defined by uncertainty was that the next night of fire would come.